I'm not going to go over all of the general prologue today. I kind of want to do some preliminary remarks and then discuss towards the end of it a bit. But I think what I will do is I will post a video lecture of going over the general prologue, just if you want to watch it, where I do go over not quite all of, or go through the description and such of not quite all of the pilgrims, but definitely those that I said the other day, you know, you ought to be aware of for the quiz, which I still haven't posted, but will. And I might have talked about this in the introductory lecture to the Middle Ages that was recorded that you watched. Something to be aware of. When Chaucer begins this, he talks about going to Canterbury, okay? Beginning of lines 15 or so. And especially from every shire's end of England to Canterbury they win, the holy blissful martyr for to seek, that them have holpen when that they were sick, etc., etc., okay? So, they're going to Canterbury to visit the shrine of Thomas of Becket. Becket was murdered on December 29th in the year 1170. Apparently, according to kind of custom, Henry II, in a kind of a drunken stupor, raging earlier in December, said to some of his knights, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?" Those are his exact words. And this was a couple days previously. And 3 of his knights got on their horses in London, rode to Canterbury, and assassinated Thomas of Becket on the altar. If you go to Canterbury Cathedral today, you will see where the actual spot was that he was killed. It's not where the high altar is today. Okay? But they've got these 3, swords made into like crosses over the spot, right? And then Henry, when he heard what the knights had done, was kind of like, I didn't really mean you to do that. And he rode to Canterbury, and he got to the city walls of Canterbury, got off his horse, got on his hands and knees, and crawled on hands and knees from the city walls to Canterbury as a mark, sign of penance. One of the reasons this is significant is because I'm going to forget the name of the movie. I just forgot the name of the movie. I think that's one. The other one is this one. Just a movie called Becket. 2 movies about Becket and Henry II. Lion in Winter, I think that's the one with Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn, where Peter O'Toole plays Henry II, Katharine Hepburn plays his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and the Becket thing is in there a bit. The other one is Becket. I want to say that's Peter O'Toole and Richard Burton. Could be wrong about that. And that's all about their friendship. See, Becket and Henry II were good friends. Becket was kind of like Henry's right-hand man. And Henry needed the church to raise taxes for him to fight wars and such. But the Archbishop of Canterbury wouldn't do it. Well, luckily for him, the Archbishop of Canterbury died. Okay? Died on his own. He wasn't, hastened along in his death. And Henry came up with the bright idea of making his best friend Archbishop of Canterbury. Okay? According to the sources, Becket pleaded with him, don't do this. Don't make me Archbishop of Canterbury. Okay? But Henry did. And when he did, it's like Becket had a real, quote-unquote, conversion experience. In other words, What he warned him was, if you make me Archbishop of Canterbury, then I will be the Archbishop of Canterbury. I will really be the shepherd of the church. And he took the job 100% seriously. Okay? It got to the point where Henry was, trying to kill him, and he fled to Europe. He fled to the Pope. And the Pope said, you got to go back. You can't stay here. You've got to go back and do what you think is right, etc., etc. So he does, and he opposes Henry, and Henry, again, says that in that drunken stupor, will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest, and then he gets killed. Okay? 10 years later, I think it's 10 years later, Becket is made a saint by the Catholic Church. That's really fast canonization. Because the Catholic Church has a whole process. There have to be miracles. Miracles have to be attested. They then have to be tested, proven, more than one, whole level of things. You got to go through the process of what's called beatification. First, you have to be named as someone who is blessed, and then you get canonized. Oh my God. It happened really quick. Okay? So, less than 200 years later, he said, 300 years later, Chaucer's here writing the Canterbury Tales about this group of pilgrims who were going to Canterbury. And he tells us where he is and where the poem begins. It begins in Southwark. This is on the south side. Here's the River Thames. It's on the south side of the River Thames of London. Okay? You can go to the area of Southwark today. It's a major area of London. The Tabard Inn no longer survives, however. Okay? And he says, I was there getting ready for my pilgrimage when in came 9 and 20 in a company. And we talked about the 29 pilgrims plus Chaucer means there will be 30 pilgrims on the way to Canterbury plus the host. The host isn't a pilgrim. He's there to judge the competition, the storytelling competition, right? So they're each going to tell 4 tales, 2 going, 2 coming, supposedly for a total of 120 stories. And Chaucer says, let's see here. Line 35. But nevertheless, since I have time and place, before that I further of this tale apace, that is, go on, methinketh it according to reason, that is, it fits reason, that I should tell you of all the condition of each of them. Okay? And your gloss tells you the character and estate is what condition means. And so it seemed to me, in which they were and of what degree. That is, who they were and of what degree, what rank in society, and also in what array they were in. So I'm going to tell you about their character, about their estate, about their rank in society, and how they're dressed. Now, when he says their estate, he's referring to this. In medieval England, there were thought to be 3 estates. And we still use this kind of language today. We still have this kind of thing today, except now there's essentially also a 4th estate, which is a little different, which we'll talk about maybe in a moment. So the 3 estates, and this is kind of the order of them. The church, the nobility, or aristocracy if you want, and commoners. In nobility, aristocracy, also the military, right? Because the knights are soldiers. Kings are soldiers, right? And these two kind of vie for supremacy. I mean, it's 1 and 2 is really close here, right? Because is the king over the church, or is the church over the king? It's the church-state problem, and it goes back to Constantine the Great, who made the church legal and then kind of put himself over the church by calling in the First Ecumenical Council, which kind of meant, I'm the emperor, I can tell the church what to do. We won't go into that, okay? So, in each of these estates, you've got rankings, right? Top of the nobility, king. And then just beneath the king, I don't know what the actual ranking is. I think it's duke, and then baron, and then earl, all the way down to squire, or, as in the prologue, the yeoman, okay? The knight's yeoman, right? In the church, who's at the top? Well, not in the Anglican church, but in the Catholic Church Middle Ages, the Pope is. But the Pope isn't in England. The Pope's off in either Italy or France, because this is, when Becket was around, this is the time when you had two popes. You had what's called the Babylonian captivity. You had a pope in Avignon, France, and you had a pope in Italy. And they both excommunicated each other. I'm the true pope, no you're not. I'm the true pope, no you're not, kind of thing. So there's, this problem. But pope, and then cardinals, archbishop, bishops, priests, all the way down to the minor orders. Who are the minor orders? We're going to meet a friar, we're going to meet a monk, we're going to meet a summoner, we're going to meet a pardoner. They're all the minor orders. We're going to hear about an archdeacon, okay? So you have this hierarchy, right? Commoners, landed gentry, like the mancipal, the shipman, the sergeant of law. These are wealthy individuals, okay, but they're not nobility. The wife of Bath is kind of on the higher end of that spectrum, all the way down to who's the lowest member on this trip, on this pilgrimage? The plowman, the parson's brother, the priest's brother. Okay? He's the lowest member of society. Because what does he do? He digs ditches, works in the field, all right? He's also one of the two people Chaucer most highly praises in the entire general prologue and in the tales. The other person Chaucer most highly praises is his brother, the parson, the country parson. Everybody else, so here's the thing about the general prologue. Everybody in the general prologue that Chaucer describes, with the exception of the parson and the plowman, he undercuts the praise that he gives to these individuals. That is, he initially and seemingly says positive things about them, but then he says things that kind of chip away at that a little bit, okay? He starts with the knight. Why? Because he's the highest member of society, okay? Even though I said the church, is up here, there's no high-ranking member of the church on this trip. The knight's the highest-ranking member of society. So he begins with the knight. He gives us a lot of description about the kinds of battles the knight has fought at. And for the longest time, and still today, most scholars think Chaucer's being totally honest in his praise of the knight. But one medieval scholar, you might be familiar with the name, might not. Terry Jones wrote a book called Chaucer's Knight. Terry Jones is one of the founding members of Monty Python. He was a medieval scholar. This is what makes Monty Python and the Holy Grail, their film, so rich, is because so much of it comes out of real medieval literature. Okay? Well, he wrote a book called Chaucer's Knight, where he looks at all of the battles that Chaucer's knight fought in, and these aren't necessarily, the greatest things for a medieval knight to have been in, because many of them are battles against other Christians. They're not battles against the infidel or pagans. Okay? Anyway, not a lot of people, accept Jones's theory, but he held it till he died. He never backed off from it. Who else? Let me give another example. The nun's prioress. Okay? I'm not going to talk a lot about her. Go over the description carefully. We're told that she speaks French, but she speaks it after the manner of Stratford and Bow. That is, she speaks proper English like somebody in Fort Payne, Alabama does, which is on the backside of Lookout Mountain. That is, she speaks French with a real strong English accent. Parlez-vous français, kind of, right? That's Chaucer kind of taking a little dig at her. What are we told about her? She's really fastidious about manners and such. I mean, she can drink wine from a goblet and do it without leaving lip prints on. She wipes her lips so much. What else are we told? She really likes fine clothes. She feeds her little dogs, rich white bread. White bread is the good bread. Not because it's white, because it's ground so well. Right? What else? She wears a golden brooch around her neck. It has a big A in it, and around that, Amor vincit omnia. Love conquers all. And this is amor. This is not agape. Two different kinds of love. Amor is what kind of love? That's erotic love. That's sexual love. This is not what a nun ought to be wearing on her, chest or whatever. Okay? We get the monk. We're told about him. Okay? Monks are supposed to do what? Vows of chastity, poverty. Monks aren't supposed to ride horses. I mean, it was an actual canon law. Right? This monk, he doesn't hold to any of those laws. He goes hunting. They're not supposed to hunt. Okay? There's a friar. We're told he's a wanton and merry. That is, he's pleasure-seeking. How pleasure-seeking? He made full many of the marriage of young women at his own cost. That is, he paid for their marriages. Why? Well, Chaucer doesn't come out and overtly say it, but he implies because he's had sex with them before they got married. And so he buys off their future husbands. See, it was a rule in this day and age, if a woman wasn't a virgin at the time of marriage and the husband discovered that on the marriage night, the marriage could be annulled. She loses everything. And this is his way of saying, you're going to find problems. I'm going to take care of that for you. Okay? So, we get all these people, all levels of society. Why? In fact, the way Chaucer puts it is, line 25, 29 in company of sundry folk, by adventure fallen, by happenstance. They just make their way there all at the same time. And of sundry folk, meaning of all levels of society. So what Chaucer is telling us he's going to do is he's going to give us, like a modern pollster supposedly should do, he's going to give us a good cross-section of society. He's going to show us what medieval English society is like, let's say, in the 1380s and 1390s. Right? And what he's going to do, to an extent, is satirize almost all of them. Probably because Chaucer is saying people are false. People put on these airs of being holy or being good or being moral or being chivalrous, and you scratch beneath the surface a little bit and you find they're not. Again, two exceptions. The parson and the plowman. The parson, everything he says about him is, this guy is the perfect image of a priest. He does everything Christ says, essentially, a priest or follower of his should be. And the plowman does the same. The plowman is willing to get the shirt off his back, is willing to dig the ditch for free, the whole 9 yards. Okay? When he discusses the wife of Beth, page 308, line 445, she's a bit deaf. She's got all kinds of kerchiefs on her head. Why? Because she's a weaver or seamstress. Okay? She is as good at cloth making, he says, as the people in, Flanders, I think it is, okay? Of Ypres and of God, which is in the Netherlands. Okay? She gets bent out of shape if some other woman comes before her at the offering in the church. In other words, don't get in front of Alice. Her name, Allison. Okay? We get a description, physical description of her. We're told she's been to Jerusalem 3 times. Why is that important? A good Muslim is supposed to visit Mecca once in their lifetime at least. The idea here is, if you're a good Christian, you're going to try to go to Jerusalem for a pilgrimage. She's been 3 times. Where else has she been? Top of 309. She's been to Rome. She's been to Boulogne. She's been to St. James in Galilee. That is, she's probably walked the Santiago de Compostela, the pilgrimage in Spain. I was going to say San something. Yeah, pretty sure Santiago, because Iago is Spanish for James. And she's been to Cologne. Okay. She knew much of 467, wandering by the way. Your gloss. She knew much about wandering along the road. Really? It's an idiotic gloss. It doesn't really tell you anything. He's not talking about just wandering along down the road. He's talking about she knew much about going off the road. She's been around the block. How do we know? Well, we're told, line 460. Husbands at church door, she had 5. Not simultaneously. Okay? Without an other company in youth. She's been married 5 times, and I'm not going to talk about the men she had when she was young. Okay, so you got to understand something. I mean, in our modern day, in our society, somebody gets married 4 or 5 times. It's no big deal. You kind of start to wonder, who'd be stupid enough to marry somebody who's been married 4 or 5 times? But in the Middle Ages, unheard of. For the simple reason that the Catholic Church taught sex was bad. Period. Outside of marriage, inside of marriage. Sex was bad. Okay? It all goes back, the other day I talked about briefly St. Augustine original. It all goes back to original sin. Original sin ultimately is all about sex and the desire for sex. It's called concupiscence. Okay? But the church said, in its wisdom, well, we got to have sex, because if we don't have sex, then the human race is going to die out. So, it's okay to get married and to reproduce, but don't enjoy it. So, have sex, but pretend it doesn't feel good, kind of thing. Right? If your husband dies, if your wife dies, it's okay to remarry. But you should probably stop there. If your second husband or wife dies, okay, we'll let you get. But 5 times, virtually unheard of, right? There's a reason we're told she's been married 5 times. Chaucer wants us to think of the Samaritan woman at the well in John's Gospel, where Christ meets this woman. He asks her for something to drink. She says something. And he says, if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for water to drink. And she goes, you don't even have a cup. And he said, you're right, I don't have a cup. Go tell your husband or whatever. And she says, and he says, you're right in saying you don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the one you're not with isn't your husband. And she's like, oh my God, you are, the Son of God, kind of thing. And that's when he goes on about, I am the living water, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So Chaucer's connecting her with her wife Beth with the woman at the well. Okay? And we're told, the end of her description, in her fellowship, line 474, well could, that is well knew, or well was she able to laugh and joke, of remedies of love she knew perchance, that is by chance, or as it happened, for she knew of that art the old dance. The old dance of love. What's that mean? Men and women, and they don't understand each other. Okay? Men don't understand how women's minds work. Women don't understand how men's minds work. That's why it's a dance. You got to figure out what are the movements. How do you do this thing? Okay? So, go to the wife of Beth. Page 331. Okay. The wife of Beth's tale is one of what's called, is part of what's called the marriage group. It's a series of, should have looked this up before class. It's like 6 or 7 of the tales that all focus on marriage as, a compact of the church and of society. Okay? Hers is one of them. And she gives us a prologue. The prologue begins around line 31 or so here. Okay. You got the introduction to the wife of Beth's prologue and tale on page 329. And her tale doesn't actually begin until 857. So her prologue is over 850 lines long. Well, take that back, minus 30, 820 lines long. Okay? Her tale, which begins on line 857, is only 407 lines long. The prologue is longer than the tale. It is supposed to be the beginning word to. That's what prologue means. The first word, the beginning word, the in front of word. Okay? It's supposed to direct us to the tale. That is, usually the tale will be longer. How many times have you opened a book and it has a preface? And the preface is longer than the book itself. Okay? Not usually. Well, that's what hers is. Why? What does she spend most of the time of her prologue on? Well, take that back. What does she spend all the time of the prologue on? What's her prologue all about? Her marriages to her 5 husbands and how they got along. How did they get along? Not well. There's a reason she said 5. She's helped some of them on their way to death. Okay? And she begins it page 331, saying, experience, though no authority were in this world, were right enough to me to speak of woe that is in marriage. Okay? And she's drawn a distinction between lived experience versus authority. What does she mean by authority? Y'all are going to write a paper for this class, and I'm going to change the requirements a little bit. I'll talk about that sometime, or I'll send out an email. Okay? But part of the requirements, as they're currently stated, say, wrong page. For this paper, you are required to cite at least 8 secondary critical sources. What are those? Those are authorities. Those are people you find, who've written articles or books or chapters or things like that, who are acknowledged experts in the field. Why do so many people look up, for example, to Anthony Fauci, medical doctor, head of the NIAID for the past 40 years, supposed expert in the field, right? That's why. Okay? So she says, experience, though no authority were in this world. That is, even if there weren't any authorities, anybody who could tell me about, write about, expound about what? Experience is enough for me to speak of woe in marriage. So there's the kind of the theme. She's going to talk about woe in marriage. And she's going to talk about it from what? Lived experience. She's saying, even if there wasn't any authority, any acknowledged experts about marriage, my experience is valid. Okay? Turns out there are written, so to speak, experts. She's going to refer to some. She's going to talk about Jesus. She's going to talk about St. Augustine. She's going to talk about other saints, Jerome and such. All right? And all those that she talks about, with the exception of Christ, are essentially use the term that many scholars use, anti-feminists. Okay? What's meant by anti-feminist? What's meant by anti-feminist today? What did Rush Limbaugh mean when he called feminists feminazis? They're bad, right? They want to take over. They want to, push men down. They want to blah, 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 right? Anti-feminist against women. Okay? Well, why? Remember what Sir Gawain said to the knight? After the knight said, that's my belt you're wearing. That's my sash. I put my wife up to it. Sir Gawain initially talks about himself, and then he does what? But, I guess I shouldn't be playing because Adam got tricked by Eve. Samson got tricked by Delilah. David got tricked by Bathsheba. What does he do? Women. Damn women. They're the cause of all the problems in the world. Okay? Kind of can't live with them, can't live without them. So what do we get here? We get the other side of the story. Okay? Bear in mind, this is Chaucer, male, giving the feminist voice. Okay? So she tells us about her marriages. Okay? And we're going to skip all of the prologue till we get to the very end of it. She's talking about her last husband. Whose name I've forgotten, and I'm trying to find it real quickly. Is this one Jenkins? Can't remember who it is. But towards the end of her actual prologue, she says, 8:10 and following. I may no longer, at last with much care and woe, We came to an agreement by ourselves. He gave me all the bridle in my hand to have the governance of house and land, and of his tongue and his hand also, and made him burn his book anon right there. So what did he do? He gave me, she says, the bridle in my hand. What does a bridle do to a horse? You got the bit that goes through the horse's mouth. The bridle attaches to the reins so that the rider can control the horse. She says, he gave me control. Control of what? Governance of house and land. You know the word economy? Like we talked about the national economy, the local economy. The original of that word talks about household, means household spending. Household spending. Goods and services, groceries, things like that. Who generally, ancient times even, had the control of the household economy, the woman of the house. She's saying, he gave me control of that. And the land that we owned. All right? And of his tongue, right? Because what does a bit do? It controls the horse's mouth. And she's like, he starts to speak, she yanks on that bridle and makes his mouth shut. And his hand also. That is, control of his mouth, which means control of his thoughts. This is why, by the way, I am a free speech absolutist. Say what you want. Why? Because when you tell somebody they can't say something, what are you doing? You're telling them they can't think something. That's denying that individual's humanity. Okay? She's saying, I got total control over him. And made him burn his book. The book that he used to read to her about how rotten women were. Okay? So she got total control. What's her story going to be about? What do women want? Okay? So we have the little part between the wife and the sumner and the friar, and then the wife gives her tale. And what kind of tale is it? It's an Arthurian romance. Arthurian romance. Like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's set during the days of King Arthur. Okay? And notice how she says, in the old days of King Arthur, of which the Britons speak great honor, all was this land filled of fairy. The elf queen with her jolly company danced full often in many a green meadow. Not the elf king, elf queen. If you think Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, this is Titania. Notice, she rules. Right? But what happened? She lost her power. Why? Because the monks and the friars were going around the land, splattering their holy water and chasing away the elves and such. Okay? So, 882, it befell that this King Arthur had a lusty bachelor in his house, that on a day came riding from the river, and he sees a maid walking before him, of which maid anon, despite her will, he does what? He rapes her. Okay? This is an Arthurian night. I talked about the Pentecost oath, chivalry and all that. He goes totally against all of those ideals. He rapes her. She runs back to Arthur's kingdom and tells the queen. And the king says, Arthur says to Elizabeth, wrong queen, says to Guinevere, you decide. What has Arthur just done? He's giving Guinevere control. You decide what should happen to the knight. He gave him to the queen all at her will, to choose whether she would him save or spill. The queen thanks the king, and so she speaks to the knight. And she tells him, you're screwed, buddy. That's what the language means. You stand in such array that of thy life yet hast thou no surety. You have no guarantee that you're going to live. She says, but I'll give you one chance. What's this chance? This is what you got to do. Okay? What thing is it, line 905, that women most desire? Answer me that question. Come back in a year and a day. So a year and a day from now, I'm going to put it in my phone. You show up and you tell me what it is women desire most. Or, what's the other option? You die here and now. Woe was this night, 9:13, and sorrowfully he sicketh, sighs. But he may not do all as him liketh, that is, because he can't do what he wants. And come again at the year's end with such answer as God would provide for him. So he leaves. He sees a house. There's a young lady. Can you tell me what it is women want? She tells him. Cool, got it. Oh, there's another house. Knocks on the door. There's another lady. What is it women want? That answer is not the same as that one. Okay, now what do I do? So what's he essentially do? He pulls out his Gallup polling, methodology. And he goes and he asks all the women he can. 9:25. Some said women love best riches. Some said honor. Some said jolliness. Some said rich clothing. Some said good sex in bed. That's lust in bed. And oftentimes to be widow and wed. That is, to be widowed and then married again. Wife of Beth telling the story, remember. Right? She's had 4 dead husbands. She's on her 5th. Some said that our hearts be most eased or refreshed when we are flattered and pleased. He goeth full nigh the truth, I will not lie. A man shall win us best with flattery, and with attendance, and with busyness, cards and flowers and candy and gifts and etc. Some say that we love best for to be free and to do just as we want. That is, open marriages kind of thing, or open relationships. And that no man reprove us of our vice, but say that we be wise and nothing foolish, for truly there is no one of us all. If any person will claw us on the sore, that is, will pick at a sore, that we will not kick, for tell us true, try, and ye shall find it is the truth. For we are so never vicious within, or wicked in, that we will be held wise and clean of sin. That is, no matter what we do, we want to be held to be wise and virtuous. Okay? And then she goes in and she talks about Ovid. But she kind of goes, but back to my night. When that he saw, 984, that he might not come thereby, that is to say, what women love most. Why? Because he's got all these different answers. And he doesn't know which one's true. He decided to head home. In other words, I'm screwed. I'll take my chances. And as he's going home, he goes into a forest and he sees these women dancing. 24 and more. Hoping he can learn something from them, he goes up to them. But they disappear. And where they were, he saw line 997, sitting a wife. Okay, the word wife, Middle English spelled with a Y, Old English spelled with an I, just means female. Wifman means female person. All the word woman means is female person. So that people who want to do this, because, sorry, not wrong one, this one, W-O-M-Y-N, because, they think that's sexist. It's not. That just means person there, okay? If you're going to do that, then you have to do, I shouldn't go into that, but you got to do that too. So, he meets her, and notice what we're told, 999, a fowler wife. There may no man devise. Devise. You got a little gloss, imagine. So imagine the ugliest person you can, or the ugliest woman that you can, and then go beyond that. Because this is a level of ugliness you cannot even imagine. Right? The knight see her rise up, and she says, Sir Knight, hereforth no lift, no way, that is, there's no road through here. Tell me what ye seek by your fay. She says, maybe I can answer it. And he says, my dear mother. Why does he call her mother? It's a term of endearment for someone older than he is, for a woman older than he is. It's a mark of respect. Okay? He says, I'm a dead man. If I don't tell the queen what it is women most desire. If you could tell me, I would well quite your hire. That is, I would repay your teaching, your telling me. And she says, plight me thy truth. Pledge to marry me. That's what troth means, by the way. T-R-O-T-H, old word, old idea. Plight me thy truth here in my hand, that is, shake my hand, promise to marry me, and the next thing that I require of you, you shall do it if it lies in your might, and I'll tell you before it's even nightfall. So, pledge to marry me and promise to do the next thing I ask of you, if you're able to. So she gives him a little out there. He says, sure. She says, okay, come on, your life's safe. Take me back. So they come to the court, and the woman says, 1037, my liege lady, notice she is saying to Guinevere, you are my liege, I am your servant. Women desire to have sovereignty as well over their husband as their love. Okay, now that could be understood as control over who they love, or they desire to have sovereignty over their husbands or husband and their lover. Courtly love tradition. Okay. Adulteress. And for to be in mastery him above. She hasn't used the language, but how does a rider ride a horse? Sits on top, is above, holds that mastery from above, with the reins and the bit and bridle. This is your most desire, though you me kill. Well, why would Guinevere kill her for saying that? Do as you please, I am at your will. Sorry, this is the knight telling Guinevere this, okay? The lady told him that, so he says, okay, here's the truth. In all the court there was neither wife nor maid nor widow that contraried that he said. They're kind of like, oh, damn. Who gave up the goods? Who told them? Yeah, he's got to live. Notice Guinevere doesn't decide on her own. Guinevere kind of goes, all right, ladies, what do you say? And they're like, yeah, that's it. And with that word, up starts the old wife and says, mercy, my sovereign lady queen. That is, she's asking for the queen's mercy, which means she's asking for the queen's help. Before you guys leave, do me right. I taught this answer unto this knight, for which he plight me his troth there. The first thing I would him require, he would do it if it lay in his might. Therefore, before this entire court, I ask thee that you take me unto thy wife. For well thou knowest that I have kept thy life. If I say false, nay, say nay upon thy faith, upon your faith. So, make him marry me. And what does the knight do? Alas and well away. No, he says. I know, right? Yeah, that was your request, but no. No, take all my goods, empty my bank account, my check, let my body go. She said, nope. For though I be foul, old, 1063, and poor, I know that I would not, I desire not, for all the metal nor for ore. Okay? I don't want riches that under earth is grave or lies above, but if thy wife I were, and also thy love. All she wants out of this world, she says, is to be your wife and to have you love me. My love, nay, my damnation. If I marry you, it will be my damnation, he says. Alas, that any of my nation, okay, nation, your gloss tells you family, it could mean tribal group. What does it mean? His birthing people. Of my DNA people, right? And my genetically related people to me and such. That any of my people should ever so foul disparaged be. That anybody like me should become so foully connected to someone like you. But all for nothing. The end of this that he constrained was. Why was he constrained? Because he swore his oath. Okay? So, they get locked up in the castle, tower that night. He wallows and writhes about. His old wife lay smiling, top of 348, and says, "Oh, husband, benedicite, that is, come on, come to bed now. Fareth every night thus with his wife as you." Is this how all men are on their wedding night? They don't want to go to bed with their wives? Is this the law of King Arthur's house? Notice what she's just done. She's extrapolated from him to the entire realm of Camelot, to the entire moral ways of Camelot. Is this what all knights are like? Just like in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Sir Gawain is taken as the representative of Camelot. So if Sir Gawain fails, Camelot kind of fails. I am your own love and your wife. I am she which saved your life. And certainly, never did I any unrighteousness to you. I've not treated you unfairly. Why fare you thus with me this first night? First night, if you ever saw the movie, Richard Gere, old movie, was this idea supposedly in the Middle Ages, if a knight gets married, and the king is nearby, the king gets to sleep with the wife first. Courtly love tradition, right? She says, why fare you thus with me this first night? You fare, that is, you act like a man had lost his wit. What is my guilt? How am I, she's saying, sinful? What is wrong? For God's love, speak, and it shall be amended if I may. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm bad. And he kind of goes, honey, look in the mirror. Okay? We'll stop there and pick up there on, what day is today? Today's Wednesday. On Friday. We'll finish this definitely on Friday. Before you go, write your name down on that little sticky note there.